दिन रात दौड़ती इस दुनिया में, क्या तुम्हें अपनी परवाह भी है? औरों की खुशी में खुश हो तुम, क्या इससे ज्यादा कुछ चाह भी है? नम आँखों की मुस्कान हो, तप त्याग की पहचान हो, उम्मीदें हो सबकी दिलासे हो तुम। खुदा तो नहीं पर खुदा से हो तुम, खुदा तो नहीं पर खुदा से हो तुम। तुम्हारा हिस्सा था शायद पल उसका जिया नहीं, जो ख्वाब तुम्हारा किस्सा था छूटा तो शिकवा किया नहीं। तुमने ही दी रिश्तों को धड़कने, तुमने ही की हर सभी उलझने, हर नफ्स की रफ्तार तुम, हमदर्द लगे हर बार तुम, ज़मीं के फरिश्ते दुआ से हो तुम। खुदा तो नहीं पर खुदा से हो तुम, खुदा तो नहीं पर खुदा से हो तुम, खुदा तो नहीं पर खुदा से हो तुम, खुदा तो नहीं पर खुदा से हो तुम।
Thank you, sir.
So
On
you're
behalf
like,
of Maharashtra Animal and Fishery Sciences University, Nagpur, and Wildlife Research and Training Organization, WRTC, Gorewada, Nagpur, I welcome you all in today's international webinar on assisted reproduction and tool for conservation of wild felids. As we know that India is a mega biodiversity hotspot in the world, we are housing wild flora and fauna in our wildlife projects. Our tiger population in India is around 3,000 numbers, and the lion population in India ranges from 650 to 700 lions. Particularly the Asiatic lions are present in India, particularly in the Gir forest. We have the leopards in huge numbers. Our India, at the same time, India lost around 110 tigers, around 500 leopards in last year. This endows the need for assisted reproduction in the conservation of the genetic diversity in the wild animals. Therefore, the today's webinar, international webinar, we organize, which is being presented by Dr. Isabel Callealta. I request to briefly introduce her. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patil. As said by Dr. Patil, we have with us a very young veterinarian, very enthusiastic and talented veterinarian, Dr. Isabel Callealta. She's from Spain, but today she is joining us from South Africa. To tell you a brief about Dr. Isabel, she got her DVM in 2008 from University of Madrid, that is in Spain. From 2009 to 2014, she worked in small animal practice, exclusively with domestic cats. In 2011, she obtained a European certificate in feline medicine, and in 2014, another European certificate in small animal reproduction. In 2016, she completed her master's degree in nature conservancy and management. In April 2020, she completed her Ph.D. involving the study of African lion reproductive physiology and development of artificial insemination protocols for these animals. The first project resulted in first lion cubs ever born by artificial insemination worldwide in August 2018. Hats off to you, ma'am. At present, she is working as a postdoctoral fellow at Mammal Research Institute of the University of Pretoria. Her research work involves around the reproductive physiology of wild animals, especially non-domestic felids, and the development and improvement of assisted reproduction techniques as a conservation tool for the endangered species. She also collaborates with GeoLifes, providing assisted technology, consulting and research in the field of wildlife and domestic animal fertility all over Europe, Africa and Asia. It's a great opportunity to have Dr. Isabel with us today. So over to you, ma'am.
Hello. I'm gonna share this one. Okay. It's very weird to just talk to my computer with no feedback or anything, but if somebody could let me know that you can see and hear, that would be really cool.
Yeah,
and then
good.
Okay, perfect. And then we can start. So thank you very much for the introduction. And yeah, as you've heard, I've been working for almost 10 years now with cats, both either domestic or non-domestic cats. And today I'm gonna try to tell you a little bit more about why reproduction is important for the conservation of and management of these felids, especially non-domestic felids. So, as a background, I'm not sure if you are aware, but just in case, at present about 25,000 species are considered threatened with extinction by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And if we only look at our cats, we could say that 25 of the 38 species are also considered either vulnerable or endangered in at least some part of the range. So what is causing these problems, and why are we losing all these animals and all these cats especially. So here you can see the main threats that affect our cats, and of course if you take a closer look you will see that disease it's there, but most of them are due to our hand, so to speak. So either destruction of the habitats, pollution, contamination, any kind of hunting, like just trophy hunting or hunting for fun, poaching, medicine, any kinds of weird stuff. And to be honest, that's not okay. So we definitely need to do something about it. No, what are the consequences of this? What happens if we lose numbers in our animals? So basically, if we think of that, and you've mentioned it already today, we have only small isolated populations of wild animals, so we count with very little numbers of animals with little numbers of genes or diverse genetics, and the problem is that they cannot interconnect one population with another population. So in the end, what we have is a few number of animals inbreeding with themselves, and then in the end, what we have is losses in fertility, a high amount of genetic defects, and in the end, a lower number of healthy calves and healthy animals. So it's just a vicious cycle. We are losing and losing numbers and losing good genes out of there. So as I said, we can do something, but what exactly? So from a political point of view or from a legal point of view, of course, we can create laws and regulations that help us taking care of conserving these species and their habitats, but in the end, that's not really up to us. So let's look at something different, and from a social point of view, there's something that we can do, and that's try to raise some awareness towards the environment and try to teach both our youngsters but also our elders to take care of the planet and take care of the animals that live in them. And then from a professional point of view, and that's for the veterinarians, the biologists, the researchers, environmentalists, everybody that can do something, what we can try is to improve or at least maintain the habitats where these animals live, of course, both the populations and the individuals, and also try to improve or maintain this genetic pool that is so at risk. So for this, probably you are aware of this too. Traditionally, there's always been two types of wildlife conservation programs. No, on the one hand, we have in situ conservation programs, and those were basically led by field biologists and by conservationists that normally evaluated the environment and tried to identify which were the threats or which are the threats that affect these animals, and then try to find solutions and strategies to beat these threats. And then on the other hand, we had the ex situ wildlife conservation programs, which basically were led by veterinarians and zoo managers and owners that originally took care of their own animals and tried to preserve their own animals. But if we go a bit further, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I'm saying that it's not so good that I say this, but of course, those two groups were fighting all the time and trying to prove which was more useful or which is better. But as I said, this makes no sense, because in the end, if we think of it, there's some species like the Sumatran tiger, for example, which at present counts with more animals in captivity than in the wild. So it doesn't really matter, or it's not so important to try to preserve a habitat if there's no animals in it. Or on the other hand, if we looked at the northern white rhino, for example, it doesn't make sense either that we try to develop artificial insemination techniques if we only have 3 animals left. So what the International Union for the Conservation of Nature is trying to do now and what's promoting is this one plan approach for the conservation, where we are trying to look at both captive and wild animals as a single population, which in the end, that's what they are. They are all the same, regardless of where they live, and try to combine both strategies to help these species. So in the end, what we are trying to do through ex situ breeding is to preserve the genetics of these animals and to produce animals that at one point can be released into the nature to strengthen these in situ conservation programs. So now that we know why it's important to breed or to at least know about the reproduction of captive and semi-captive animals, we're gonna speak a little bit about that, which was the point of the webinar. And here I need you guys to remember two important things, and one of them is that the survival of any species in the end is absolutely related with the success of their reproduction, but also that reproduction is a luxury in the end. It's a luxurious activity. So no animal, including us, is going to be able to reproduce if anything else is wrong or is not working. So that's why before we start talking about reproduction and how to breed animals and so on, we need to make sure that our cats are healthy. And for that, there's plenty of guidelines that you can find online at no cost that give you an idea of what to do with these animals. So, for example, this that I've put here is the recommendations for tigers according to the American Associations of Zoos and Aquariums. And basically, if you look into that, it's keeping the facilities clean and check at them every day, taking a look at their feces every couple of months, and of course once per year at least take blood samples and urine analysis, even cleaning their teeth and checking the pores, because in the end these animals are cats, and I'm sure you all know that cats are very good at hiding pain. So if you don't look at them every day, you will only realize that they are sick when they are really sick. So yeah, it's better to take a closer look at them and know what can mean that the tiger or the lion is losing weight, and just wait until they are not eating or they are visually sick. Okay, now we have animals that are healthy, and now we can start speaking about reproduction. And in this case, we can talk about two types of reproduction. No, we've got natural mating and we've got assisted reproduction. That is the one that we can apply as well to help. And in the end, the natural mating is the one that is more used usually because it's the easiest one. In the end, you just need to have one female and one male, put them together and let them do what they do. But in reality, there's a couple of things that we need to take care of, or at least be aware of. And one of them is the reproductive biology, as well as the social structure of these animals. So normally, I hope this is not too high, most felid species are solitary, and this means that they live alone and they only meet other individuals during the breeding season when they find a female in estrus or they are in estrus and they want to mate. And that's basically it. The rest of the time they are apart and they can show even aggressiveness toward other animals if they meet. Why is this important? Because if we go to our captive settings and we have animals that shouldn't be together, then we can have problems. Such the ones that these snow leopards have. So even the female is in estrus and they want to instinctively breed or mate, they cannot do it until they are alone. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another thing that we have to consider are the individual preferences. So okay, they are animals, but they also like some animals more than others. And if you put two cats together that don't like each other, or that have been living together for so long that they consider each other siblings, for example, or related, they won't mate unless there's nothing else more interesting to do. And finally, we've got lions. And basically, and basically, lions don't care about anything, and they are completely different from the rest of felids. So, they live in prides. So that means that there's always a lot of fellows around, and they don't care if there's others looking, or if it's the one, the other, they don't care. They would just mate. So it's really, really important in captive settings that we avoid endogamy and that we don't allow them just to do whatever they want without any precaution. That's why I have created this little table here about the most frequently used contraceptive methods in non-domestic felids, and basically the summary of this is that there's no ideal method. So all of them have advantages and all of them have disadvantages. So in the end, what you have to do is to know your cats and to know what options are there, and always try to talk with the breeding program manager or with somebody that can recommend you what to do with your cats. But just very briefly, there's mechanical methods, and these are probably the most used because it's the easiest. Again, you just have to keep males and females apart if you don't want to breed, and of course this is a reversible situation, so as soon as you want them to breed, you can put them back together. There's also hormonal treatments, and probably to date, the most commonly used are the Slorelin implants. So this is a GnRH agonist, and basically what it does is that once you've put it, it stimulates the FSH, LH, and in the end, by a negative feedback, it disables the reproduction. The problem is that we don't really know for how long it does it. So one of the bad things is that at the beginning it will stimulate the reproduction or the reproductive activity instead of just inactivating it, and then we don't know the specific length of the effect of this drug. So it said it must be between 2 and 4 years, but it depends on the species and of course on the dose. Another thing to take care of with this is that even though the effect is not permanent, it looks like it. So it will, the animals will lose the secondary sex characteristics, and if you have a beautiful male lion in a zoo and you apply this, you will lose the mane, for example, and that's something the zoo manager probably won't be happy with. So you have to take care of this as well. Analogous or exogenous progestagens are also out there and they're an option, but again, they are not really recommended for long-term use because, as you all know, the long exposure to progesterone may lead to problems in the uterus, like cystic endometriosis or pyometras or etc. Well, neoplasias is not so proof, but that's also true. And so, yeah, probably in particular cases it's fine, but for long-term it's not the most recommended. And then finally, we also have surgical methods, which of course are permanent and may also bring some issues like weight gain or this loss of secondary characteristics that we spoke about. Of course, in males, you need to be aware that even though you remove the testes or perform a vasectomy, there's still sperm that can be active for 6 to 8 weeks there. And the last thing, I hope I don't forget anything, is that you must be aware with vasectomized males, because in the end, they are going to keep on reproducing, and most felid females are induced ovulators. So in the end, if you have a female ovulating but not getting pregnant, you're also going to have these problems that we've mentioned related to the long-term effect of the progesterone. So, okay, that being said, we can start with the second part of, of the reproduction, which was the assisted one. And here all I can say is that this is a really, really useful tool that is not as much used as it should or it could. And well, obviously I've mentioned this before when we talk about the ex situ breeding program, so it can improve natural breeding in these cases where the pair of animals is not compatible, or we don't have a male or we don't have a female that we can breed with, or yeah, when they show aggression, the ones with the others, if there is any other problems. And of course, assisted reproduction techniques can also help us enhance the genetic diversity and try to mitigate the inbreeding, because, well, we can get sperm and we can get oocytes from one animal that is somewhere, and then just ship them, transport them, and use them to fertilize another animal that is really far away with completely new genes. And that's something that unfortunately today in nature can't really happen. So to date, semen cryopreservation and artificial insemination are the two techniques most used in wild felids. And embryo transfer and in vitro fertilization have also been used, but at this point I would say that mostly in research. So we're going to speak a little bit about the two firsts, but that's it, I think. And the problem is that the useful they can be does not relate with the success rate that we get from these techniques. This means if you compare, for example, as it's in the slide, the success rate of artificial insemination with fresh sperm in cattle, or even in domestic cats, that's way higher than the success rate of the same technique in wild or non-domestic felids, either if they are small or large. And why is that? Well, but some people blame the anesthesia, so to speak, because of course you can go and inseminate a cow while she's alive, or a pig or a dog while she is awake and standing, but I wouldn't recommend you to do the same with a tigress or a female leopard or a lioness. So we need anesthetics, and there's some studies that say that these drugs can interfere with the ovulation process and the implantation and so on, so that could be a possibility. As well, there's some other studies that prove that the actual effect of the drugs that we use to induce ovulation are very variable or differ a lot between species, and they don't work the same in one cat or in another cat, or in one tigress or in a lioness. They don't respond the same, and the doses that we need to use are different as well, and we don't really know which are the ideal doses yet. And well, other people or other branches also blame the actual quality of the gametes that we use. So the sperm quality is bad, or the embryos are bad, or whatever. But in the end, if you think about it, it doesn't really matter if it's assisted reproduction or natural reproduction. They're gonna use the exact same sperm and oocytes, so we can't really blame that, I would say. What I can say, and this is no secret, is what it's out there and it's been proved already, that probably the main problem why assisted reproduction techniques are not so successful in wild animals compared to domestic animals is because we don't really know barely anything about their physiology, about their reproductive physiology. And in the end, if we don't know how these animals work, we cannot try to mimic what they do to improve it. So that's basically the main problem that we have here. And this slide might be a bit messy, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to make a brief summary of what the ovarian cycle or the reproductive cycle of the cats look like. No, so generally, and this is important, we have to remember that cats are polyestrous and generally affected by photoperiod, and they are induced induced ovulators. That means that they only ovulate after mating, although there are some species that also present spontaneous ovulations. But well, generally, when we have a non-ovulatory cycle, we will be here. We would have a female that goes from estrus to interestrus and then estrus to interestrus, and this means she allows mating, she will not allow mating, she will have high concentrations of estrogen and low concentrations of estrogen until she ovulates. So she's in a, let's say, eternal follicular phase until she ovulates. So once ovulations occur, if the mating was successful, she would be pregnant, and then after a variable period of time, she will give birth and enter a lactational anestrus, while if the breeding was not successful, then she will enter a luteal phase, but this would be a non-pregnant luteal phase, also called pseudo-pregnancy. And then again, after a variable period of time, which normally is about 1/2 or 1/3 of pregnancy, she will go back into estrus, interestrus, interestrus until a new ovulation happens. I hope that was clear. I'm sorry. But well, this is basically the same, but just from a physiological point of view. We've talked about the estrogens, progesterone, once the corpus luteum is there. And in this table here, I just wanted to show you guys that even though it said that an ovulatory cycle of felids is about 2 to 4 weeks with estrus of about 5 to 6 days, this can vary a lot between species, even though the cats are, or the species are similar in size or weight and so on. So the summary of all this, and I'm sorry I'm speaking a lot, is just we need to know our cats and we need to know how they behave and how they look like before we start planning any special reproduction techniques with them. And how do we learn something about our cats? So how can we monitor the cycle of our females, for example? And we're going to talk about this. There's different methods that we can use, and we're going to start with the non-invasive methods. This means basically that we don't need to even touch the animal. Just by looking at them, or we can get some information about them. So firstly, through behavioral observations, and that's, as I said, just looking at them. First of all, we're going to realize that felids, regardless of the species or the gender or anything, just sleep a lot all the time. But as well, by looking at them, we will be able to identify in some cases and in some species females in estrus by specific behavioral signs. So in some of them, like lionesses, you will see now, or most cats, it would be quite easy to see. But some individuals or even some species like cheetahs are more shy, I'd say, and they don't usually show signs so easily. So that could be a challenge as well. But well, that's something that we can do to have an idea. Frequently monitoring of the behavior will probably tell us if the female is or is not in estrus. Also, we can take a look at the feces. We don't need to touch the animal, we just need to go in the enclosure and collect their fecal samples, and with that we can determine the concentration of the fecal metabolites of steroids or of progesterone, to look at estrogen peaks that will tell us probably about estrus events, or progesterone peaks or clusters that would tell us about pregnancies or pseudo-pregnancies. However, we need to take care, and sometimes we need another technique to complement this, because at least with estrogens, we may see lots of false negatives or false positives. So it's not an extremely reliable tool to detect estrus by itself. Also, we can use the fecal metabolites of prostaglandin F2 alpha to detect pregnancy, and this had been assayed in different species of felids, and it looks like it works quite well, because at the end of pregnancy, we get a rise in this hormone, while in pseudo-pregnancy, there's not this hormone at all, because it comes from the fetoplacental unit. So that might be something to help us as well to distinguish between pregnancy and pseudo-pregnancy. And sorry, I think I forgot to say, but remember that in those cases, both pseudo-pregnancy and pregnancy, we are in a luteal phase, there's progesterone in the blood, so it might be more difficult to know if it's the one or the other by only looking at progesterone. Then we go to another group of techniques that we can use to monitor the ovarian cycle, and these are the minimally invasive methods. So I like this particularly quite much. This is basically, we're still doing no harm to the animal, but on the contrary, as opposed to the previous one, we actually need some cooperation from them. So probably you've seen these videos because they are online everywhere. And basically what we are doing with practically, or basically all our cats and even elephants, rhino, everything in the zoos is to train them by positive reinforcement conditioning. So basically we teach them to follow a target and to do certain tasks in exchange of a positive reinforcement, which in the case of felids is meat normally. And as you've seen, by this technique, we can teach them to open the mouth and show us the teeth, to show us the flanks, to get into a special position. As you see, we can get to touch their tails and to even collect blood, perform ultrasound scans transabdominally. So it's quite useful. It's cool for the animals as well, because they have an enrichment. It's kind of an enrichment for them, and it also helps the management of these animals in captivity a lot. Here I wanted to show you, it's just more of the same, but I just wanted to show you a brief video of what I did in my PhD. It's been just 1 year ago, so I'm still very proud of it. And well, in the same way, we trained 6 lionesses, and we teach them to allow us to collect, as you've seen, pictures of the vulvar lips, and to collect vaginal smears as well from them. And we did this in a very frequent basis, so we could actually monitor the cycle on a daily basis, which is fundamental if we want to apply any reproductive techniques. Also, yeah, it's here as well. Also, we train them to collect blood samples from the tail, and basically these blood samples may serve as well to analyze hormones, but I'm not going to comment anything else about this because we've seen already these graphs with the fecal metabolites, and in the end it's more or less the same. This is just a couple of pictures so you see the results of these tests, sorry. But yeah, basically only with a little bit of effort and a little bit of patience and a little bit of collaboration from the part of the animals, you can get to see, well, that or a very good pair of binoculars, of course. You can get to see the vulvar lips, and you definitely can distinguish between a female that is close to estrus or a female that is not in estrus at all. You can see secretions. In this case, it was a postpartum, but you could as well look at pathological secretions from biometers or vaginitis and things like that. And in some cases, it will not be so easy to distinguish in which phase we are. So that's why I wouldn't recommend to use this technique by itself, but combined as well with others. And for that, as we saw as well, vaginal cytology can help with a lot. So please be aware that these pictures are for now only for African lions, so we don't really know if these same patterns are like this in other animals like cheetahs or tigers or other things. I don't know why this is going by itself, sorry. But yeah, basically, as in every single animal, we can distinguish very easily between estrus and diestrus. So we will know if the female is in heat because we will see these superficial cells, clear backgrounds, lots of bacteria everywhere. While right after estrus, we will start seeing all these neutrophils and clumping of cells that will tell us that it's already too late to do anything if we wanted to inseminate the female, for example. In diestrus, we will start seeing all these small parabasal and basal cells, some neutrophils, but above all, lots of mucus and lots of debris in the background. And this, in the case of, again, I'm sorry, in the case of lions, we can see when the female is going to be in estrus. So during pro-estrus and sometimes all the inter-estrus, we can see lots of neutrophils and decreasing amounts of parabasal cells, increasing amounts of superficial cells. And then, of course, if the species we're talking about has an estrus, then we will see, like in these pictures, very low cellularity and just a couple of basal or parabasal cells, and that's it. But again, this, especially this picture of pro-estrus, it's been described so far, I don't know what's happening. It's been described so far in lions, and we need to continue research to see if that happens as well in other species. Okay, and the last kind of methods that we can use to monitor the ovarian cycle of wild felids, and these are the invasive or invasive monitoring tools. And I say invasive because in this case, of course, we don't harm the animal either, but we need to anesthetize them to do something or to apply these techniques. And basically, I'm talking about ultrasound examination. And if we want to do a proper ultrasound exam, then I would recommend to use the transrectal approach because it's the only one that is going to give us access to every single part of the reproductive tract. Now, this is just a little reminder of the reproductive tract. We have a vagina, a cervix that leads us into the uterus body, and then a bifurcation with two horns, and of course two ovaries with the respective follicles depending on the stage. So what we do is basically to insert a probe in the colon, and then we can have a longitudinal view of all the tract. And in this way, we're gonna be able to see the vagina. It's normally narrow and very, very long, but of course it depends on the species. We're gonna get to the cervix, which is like the door to the uterus, and we would want to cross this one to go into the uterus if we want to inseminate a female. Then after the uterine body, we will reach the bifurcation of the two horns. And finally, we will get into the uterine horn where you can perfectly see the different layers. We have the mucosa, the endometrium, and the myometrium. And in this case, I just put normal pictures of the tract, but of course, you can use this technique as well to detect if there is any pathologies like pyometers, mucometers, or endometriosis, cysts in the uterine endometrium, and so on. But I guess the most useful part of transrectal ultrasound is to take a look at the ovaries if we want to monitor the ovarian cycle. And in these cases, we will see while the female is in pro-estrus, only these small, tiny, but very numerous follicles in the ovaries. When the female goes in estrus, these follicles will start growing until they reach the pre-ovulatory size. Of course, this varies again between species, and actually there's not a lot of species where we know which the exact size of a pre-ovulatory is, but again, we're working on that. And then when the female goes past estrus, we can have two different images. So if there's no ovulation, we will see these big follicles, but they start flattening, and we start seeing these hyperechogenic content inside because they start regressing, while when the female ovulates, then what we see is the beginning of the formation of a corpora lutea. So we still have the follicle inside and the corpora lutea is starting to form around it. Once we are in diestrus, what we would see is a proper already formed corpora lutea like this that you can see here. And we can also see small follicles, but we do have a corpora luteum there. And of course, if the female is pregnant, we will find babies inside, not in the ovaries, but in the uterine horns. And just to end the slide, of course, if the female is in an estrus, either juvenile anestrus or seasonal anestrus, we won't see functional structures in the ovaries. Okay, that's been long, but I hope not too painful. So now that we know how to take a look at our females and how to know what they look like and where in the cycle are there, we're going to talk briefly about these two assisted techniques for reproduction that we've talked about. And for that, we need to take our animals into the table and start working with them. I just love this picture because of my face of confusion, like I didn't even know where to start with. But yeah, let's go with it, eh? So, first thing we want to do, or we want to get if we try to inseminate a female, or it's semen, of course. So there's different ways that we can use to get the sperm, and one of them, which is actually not really used in cats, I'm not gonna lie, is the artificial vagina. So this is widely used in dogs and horses and sheep, but in cats, not so really, because, I mean, they don't really allow you to touch them, even to cuddle them, so not to speak, if you want to collect sperm from them. But yeah, there's some crazy people that manage to train cheetahs to allow semen collection with artificial vagina. I can't do anything but clap and give them an applause. And yeah, I just wanted to tell you that it's possible. Not really useful, but it's, sorry, not useful, not really common, but it's there. Actually, the most used technique to collect sperm from wild animals or non-domestic animals, especially felids, is the electroejaculation. And here, basically, what we do is to insert a probe in the rectum with lots of lube, of course, and the size of the probe, again, may vary depending on the species. And what we do is to give low voltage stimuli over the prostate and the vulvouretral glands so that we can get and ejaculate out of there. And then with this technique, basically what we get is samples that have a big or a large volume, but are not really concentrated. So they are useful, but as I said, big volumes, low concentration. On the other hand, and lastly, we have a newer technique that's been applied first in domestic cats, but now it's also been tested in many wild species of cats and wild species in general. It's been used in basically everything. Wild dogs, even flamingos. I think I've read a paper in one conference last year. So basically what you do is with your animal sedated, preferably with medetomidine, you take one catheter, a urinary catheter, and you insert it in the prostate, in the urethra, slowly up to the prostate, as you can see here in the ultrasound. Not going farther away, because otherwise you will put your catheter in the bladder, in the urinary bladder, and we don't want that. So carefully into the into the urethra up to the prostate. And then by capillarity forces, the sperm, as you see in this other picture, will go in the catheter, and we will get samples that have a very small volume in comparison with the electroejaculation, but they are really concentrated. And this is perfect for both cryopreservation or insemination. So we like this method very much. in my opinion, or my advice, if you have a cat sleeping already, use both techniques. Do not just choose one, but I would recommend always to use both of them. And then I just wanted to put a small slide or a short slide on the analysis of the semen, because as I said, one of the reasons why some people think that assisted reproduction techniques don't work really well, or artificial insemination doesn't work very well, is because of the quality of the sperm. And it is true that if you see here, overall in most felid species, we have really, really high amounts of abnormal sperm. So there's lots of morphological abnormalities, but that's what they get. So I would say they are going to use that sperm anyways, by natural mating or by artificial insemination. So these high amounts of abnormal sperm wouldn't worry me, so long as we have a good amount of sperm, a live sperm, and a good motility rate, because in the end what we need is just one sperm for one cup. So yeah, we have to use it anyways. And I think I didn't say it, but most probably this high amount of abnormal sperm is related to the low variability of the genes by the poor quality of the genome. And yeah, we do have sperm, so please remember that these are endangered species or threatened species, so we don't want to waste anything that they gave us. So if you manage to collect the sperm, please either use it or freeze it, but do not lose it. And in this regard, I will say that there's not a lot of studies done about sperm cryopreservation in wild felids, which is a shame. By now, at least for my experience, is that every person does it by a different method and on a different way. So we all use the one that works better for us, and that's not really okay. So that's why we need to keep on working to find proper protocols that work precisely in all these species. So I can't say little by this topic, but basically what it's out there is that extenders and cryopreservants with glycerol or lactose in egg yolk are the ones that work better in wild felids. This particular is from lions and tigers, just so you know. There's also some studies that have compared which works better, either freezing in vials or in straws, and apparently there's no difference as long as the concentration in those vials or straws is small, around 60 million every 300 microliters. And also there are a couple of new studies that talk about vitrification of sperm instead of cryopreserving it in straws, but for now that's, as far as I know, just research, and we'll have to see how that evolves in the future. So this is really interesting because there's a really open blank space here to investigate for all of those that want to do it. And yeah, we finally get to the actual artificial insemination. And again, I just want to give two little hints on it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because otherwise this is going to be really long. But I just want to tell you guys that the most traditional techniques that have been used for artificial insemination have been surgical generally. And again, remember, felines are induced ovulators, so if we inseminate them, we have to make sure that we induce their ovulation. It wouldn't be the first time that somebody inseminates a cat and then forgets to inject something to make them ovulate. So it won't work if you don't induce the ovulation. So traditionally, the protocols for these consist of gonadotropins, normally ECG or HCG. The problem with these drugs is that if we use them several times, in the end, the animals can become resistant to this, let's say that. And also we can see problems of hyperestrogenism, superovulation, and luteal insufficiency, I think it was, if I remember correctly. Also, of course, if we take into account that we are doing a surgery, or in the end we are performing a surgery, even if it's a short procedure, we're going to need experienced professionals that know how to do it. We're going to need expensive equipment to do this. And also we're going to need post-op care. And in some cases with cats and with dogs, this might be easy, but it may be more complicated if you want to do this with wild animals. Despite all of this, there are several attempts that are been doing, and before we performed a lot of laparotomies, but now the trend and most studies are going to this other side, so performing laparoscopy to perform intrafallopian artificial insemination, which apparently has been, well, first of all, less invasive, even though it's still a surgery, and also it looks like it's been more successful, but still, if you see here, the successful rate is not that good yet. Hopefully we'll continue trying and we'll get to improve these numbers and develop more precise protocols for each species. So what I did for my PhD, again, and sorry I'm talking again about this, but basically what I did and what my team is trying to develop is a new technique, well, not new, but different technique, less invasive and trying to mimic as much as possible what happens in real life, so to speak. So before we were talking about surgical artificial insemination, what we're trying to do is non-surgical artificial insemination. So basically we bring the animals again to the table and we try to position them as similar as what they would do in nature, like you could see in these pictures. So we put them with the tails or the flanks up as they would do in nature, and then we take one catheter and we insert it in the vagina and try to go through the cervix to deposit the sperm in the uterus. To be honest, sometimes it's really difficult to go through the cervix. Like animals like lions have really, really long vaginas. They can be up to 30 centimeters, 20, 30 centimeters. So it's very complicated once you have your catheter in there to manipulate it to be able to go through the cervix. But that's the original idea, and that's what we try to do. And actually, that's what we've done with smaller cats like Asiatic golden cats and Persian leopards. And so far, it's working really, really well, up to 45% of success this far. And of course, we would like to try this with more species, and that's what we're working on. So let's see what the future tell us. I think I have forgotten to say, again, another difference between traditional methods and this current method is the ovulation induction. So before, or most protocols use gonadotropins, what we are trying to use here is just a GnRH agonist. So the basic difference towards the animal is that this only requires one single injection, and instead of several injections during several days that we need for the gonadotropins, and we're getting really good success. It's true that the time interval between the injection and the ovulation may vary quite a while, between 24 up to almost 72 hours, I would say, but it's working very well and it's inducing ovulation in all cases. So we are quite happy and we hope that we can try with other species soon. And yeah, to finish, we have spoken about getting sperm, analyzing it, and placing it in the right place. So the last thing we need to talk about is the diagnosis of pregnancy, which in the end is what we want to achieve. And for this, there's also different techniques. So we've already spoken about transrectal scans. Of course, we don't want to sedate females all the time when they are pregnant. So training females to perform transabdominal ultrasounds would also be a great idea, and it's been done already in a couple of species. Of course, we can use external visualization, so we could check, and if you see there's a big tummy and there's like enlarged nipples, but normally we can only see this in the last 2 weeks, I would say, and most of the times you don't really know if the female just ate and is a fat female or if she's really pregnant. And obviously we can also make x-rays when the fetus have all their bones mineralized, and we can also detect the little ones in there. And this is not new, but I didn't want to put lots of tables with weird graphs. We can again go and do endocrine analysis in both feces and blood. We can check progesterone, as we saw before, but again, sometimes it's different to distinguish between pregnancies and pseudo-pregnancies because they might be quite similar. We can use prostaglandin F2 alpha or the metabolite. Remember, we have to see an increase at the end of the pregnancy that we don't see during pseudo-pregnancy. And also there are some studies that talk about the use of relaxin in feces and also in urine. And this hormone normally rises from days 20 to days 50, more or less, of pregnancy. But again, this is cats. It's been tried in a couple of species, unofficially and even less officially. But it looks like it could be very useful as well to detect pregnancy. So more research topics to discover. And yeah, I think I've been super fast in the end. I really thought this was going to take longer, but but we are done here. And I will be happy to take any questions if you have. I'm sorry, I've been just jumping quickly from one topic to another. Of course, if you have any tigers and you want to try inseminations, we are really open to discuss, and we are actually looking forward to try, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you are still there, not sleeping. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for our elaborate insight into the elaborate and the feline species and the assisted reproduction into that segment. We have quite a few questions because this topic is something very new for most of the audience there. And I think that some 30-40 audience may be experiencing or doing some work of it, but primarily we are in very different phase than what you do. So I'll put those questions to you. The first question says, which is the prime season or the prime time when you prefer doing AI in lions? It is more effective. Season and then time. You are mute. You are on mute.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, this depends a lot on the species. So lions, for example, are, and I would say most animals that live close to the tropics are not really affected by the photoperiod. So you can see estrus all year long. And then there's other species that may be more seasonal, and it's normally between the I won't say months because that changes from the northern and the southern hemisphere and it's a bit confusing, but it's normally between the months of spring, summer up to autumn, and then they do not breed anymore during the months of the year where the light is shorter, where there's less hours of light. Was I clear with that?
Yeah. Okay. Any specific anesthetic protocol you recommend once you are using anesthetic?
An anesthetic protocol?
Yeah.
Yeah, normally we used medetomidine, ketamine, and midazolam most usefully. I could send you guys the doses if you want, because I don't know them by heart, but normally we use with both males and females metetomidine, midazolam, and what did I say? And ketamine. Yeah.
In India, we are using, we are trying to immunize animals against GNRH. So, do you think that is a right strategy? What is your experience about it?
It depends on what you want to achieve. So for now, these vaccines against the GNRH, and there's also vaccines against the zona pellucida of the oocyte. There's a lot of research that is going on, and it's been used in elephants, and I think I've read something in giraffes as well, and in many, like there's a lot of different zoos that are trying their own species, so to speak, but we still don't know very well if it works in every species, including tigers, lions, and so on. And of course, it's a permanent solution. So again, we're talking about threatened species or endangered species, so ideally we don't want them not to breed. But of course, in zoos, we don't want them to breed, so it's a bit confusing. But overall, and what I got from this Association of Contraception in Wild Animals is that they don't really recommend to use this, or not that they don't recommend it, but it's not really applicable because we don't really know if it works or if it doesn't work, and it might be expensive and it might not be available in every place. So personally, I don't have experience with it, but that's what I've read, that it's not really applicable at the moment because they don't know if it works or if it doesn't work, basically.
Yeah. Isabel, the next question is, which is the best method that you feel for pregnancy diagnosis in lions? And early. Early and effective. Early and effective. Earliest diagnosis and effective diagnosis.
Okay.
How many?
Yeah, well, I would say the most effective and the most visual is the echography, and I personally like echography very much. So if you can manage to train your captive animals to just take a quick look transabdominally and see if there's something or if there's nothing, I think that would be the easiest and the clearest. Then I've also used progesterone levels and even behavior, just behavior. So if you control the time that the lioness does not show estrus signs, then you know exactly if she's pregnant or if she's not, because you know the estrus is gonna last 6 days. So if they don't show estrus for 2 weeks, they are in interestrus. If they don't show estrus for 2 months, then they might be pregnant or not. But if it's more than 50 days, you know they are pregnant. But obviously, that's a long wait. So yeah, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot again, but I'd say the echography, and then if you can use any test to help you, then like progesterone, or that could be fine. But of course, you need to know how was the progesterone before she was pregnant to compare. And relaxin and PGF-M haven't really been tried in lions. They have been tried in other species like lynx, and I don't remember right now, but not in lions. So that would be something to explore. But practically, the best thing is to monitor the behavior if you can, and then double check that with cytologies, and if you can do ultrasound, of course.
One fundamental question is coming from the audience. Say we have taken sperm from a tiger. So
Okay.
how many tigers can I use it? What should be my just a
Yeah.
mathematical.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because in cattle and horses and even dogs, we just collect sperm and then prepare a lot of different fractions that we can later use in a lot of different females. The problem is that we don't know what's the minimal dose that we need to succeed in artificial insemination with wild animals. So right now, while we are investigating or researching, my advice would be, if you have sperm of one male, use it with one female, because that's what they would do in nature. Until we don't have the dose that we actually need, in the end, if you have one dose and you make a lot of fractions and use it with a lot of females, it might be a waste of sperm if we don't know if it will work or not. So right now, I would say my advice is, you take it, you use it as it is, but just with one female that you know it's in the perfect timing for it.
Last question to you.
Okay.
Have you encountered pyometra or pseudopregnancy ever in these felines? If yes, what is the treatment protocol that you followed?
Okay. Well, so the pregnancy, I said so. It's something that happens and it's physiological. So you don't need to treat any pseudo pregnancy in felines, because it happens when the female ovulates and it's not pregnant. That's going to happen every time. Pyometras, we've encountered pyometras and even cystic endometriosis, and you can go with aglepriston. I don't know how to pronounce that in English, but it's the allicin. Of course, it might be really expensive for big cats, because it's already expensive for dogs and regular size cats, so it might be expensive. And otherwise, you can go with prostaglandins and antibiotics, as well as you would go in small animals. Of course, with the dose that you would use for a bigger animal. And yeah, I think that's it. Well, and sorry. I'm saying sorry. I'm saying this because that's the hormonal treatment in case you want to breed the animal. Of course, if it's not a suitable animal for breeding, or is an old female, or you don't want to use the genes, of course the first treatment you have to go to is the ovariohysterectomy, like you would do again in a small animal.
Last question to you, which has come out just now. What is the progesterone level which will define pregnancy? In terms of nanogram.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I've got the impression I'm not answering anything of what you want to know. Because once more, it depends on your animal. So it's not like cats or like dogs that we know exactly the level of progesterone that they have before ovulation, almost after ovulation, and so on. We don't know. So and again, think that it's 36 different species, and it might be different for each species. So in this case, what we do is or what I could recommend you is to have a baseline of your females, to know what they look like normally when they are not pregnant, and then you can see if the progesterone is higher when they are pregnant or not. But right now, there's no a level that says above this is pregnant, below that is not pregnant. There's nothing like that so far.
Thank you, Isabel. The overall feedback of people is it was a nice presentation.
Cool.
We have
I'm
heard from
happy.
We have so over to my colleagues for thanks from them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Patil.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Nitin Bhatia. and good evening to you. I hope you're doing good. On behalf of Wildlife Research and Training Center, I, Dr. Sujit Kolangar, take this opportunity to thank everybody who has been associated with the conduction of this international webinar. First and foremost, let me take this opportunity to thank our wonderful speaker, Isabel Callealta Rodriguez. Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. I appreciate the detailing and the clarity of the presentation. Thank you for sharing your work and your experiences with the wild felids. You have indeed inspired us. Many of our young people who are watching this webinar go live have gained inspiration, and I'm sure they would like to be somebody like you. I wish you the very best in the coming time. From WRTC, we wish you best for all your future endeavors. I also like to take this opportunity to thank our beloved Vice Chancellor, Colonel Professor Dr. A.M. Paturkar sir, for his encouragement and already support for conduction of novel initiatives like this. I also put on records the support and encouragement that we have received from Dr. N. Rambabu, Honorable Head of Forest Forces, Maharashtra State, and Managing Director, Forest Development Corporation of Maharashtra, Nagpur, for his unconditional support. We also would like to put on records the support and encouragement that we have received from office bearers of MAFSU. We like to thank Dr. A.P. Somkuwar sir, Director of Instructions and Dean, Faculty of Veterinary Sciences, MAFSU Nagpur. We also thank Dr. N.V. Kurkure, Director of Research, MAFSU Nagpur, Dr. V.D. Aher, Director of Extension Education, MAFSU Nagpur, for their support in making this international webinar a reality. We also like to put on records the contribution of Shri Panchbhai sir, Divisional Manager, Gorewada Project, Nagpur, for the support he has extended in conduction of this webinar. I also appreciate the support of Dr. S.B. Kavitkar, Associate Dean, Nagpur Veterinary College, Nagpur, for granting us the permission to conduct the webinar here. I also would like to put on records the dynamic support that we have received from INTAS Animal Health. Dr. Nitin Bhatia and his team have always been associated with supporting us in as a knowledge partner in various novel initiatives. Sir, we appreciate the technical support that you have rendered to this event, and it is only because of this technical support that we were able to conduct this webinar in a flawless way. Thank you so much, and congratulations to your team, sir. We also would like to put on records the important contribution of our respected director, Dr. Shirish Upadhyay sir, for his encouragement and support in conduction of this webinar. We also thank our Chief Organizing Secretary, Dr. M.S. Patil. We thank the Head of Animal Reproduction, Gynecology and Obstetrics, Nagpur Veterinary College, Nagpur, Dr. S.K. Satpure sir. We thank Dr. D.S. Raghuvanshi sir, Deputy Director, Research, CBF Nagpur. We also thank A.P. Gawande sir, Associate Professor, Nagpur Veterinary College, Nagpur. And also let me put on records the contribution of Dr. Paushe and Dr. Shalini for the efforts to make this program a success. Last but not the least, let me thank all our viewers who joined us from various places around the world. It is only because of your presence that we are always motivated to take forward novel initiatives like this. With this, I thank one and all for being a part of this knowledge sharing fest. Until next time, it is a good day from here. Thank you.
Thank you. I, on behalf of all the veterinary community, thank you, WRTC, for organizing such endeavors for the wildlife sector and make it a growing phase from India and taking the research across the globe. Thank you all, the entire team of WRTC. Over to, I think with that we come to an end. Thank you, our speaker, learned speaker, and the entire team who has been associated, and the team of WRTC. Thank you to all. Thank you all. Thank you, ma'am.